Shirley Dander and Marcus Longridge had settled back into their tasks, the atmosphere only slightly altered by their conversation. In Slough House, sounds seeped easily. If he were interested, Roderick Hoe might have rested his head against the wall separating his office from theirs, the better to hear them, but all he registered was the familiar buzz of other people establishing relationships. He was, anyway, busy updating his online status, adding a paragraph to Facebook describing his weekend at Chamonix, tweeting a link to his latest dance mix. Ho's name for these purposes was Roddy Hunt. His tunes were looted from obscure sites he subsequently torched. His photos were tweaked stills of a young Montgomery Clift. It still amazed Ho you could build a person from links and screenshots, launch him into the world like a paper boat, and he'd just keep sailing. All of the details that built up a person could be real. The only fake was the person. Constructing a mythical work pattern for his user ID had been the most brilliant thing Ho had accomplished this year. Anyone monitoring his computer time would confirm his constant presence on the service network, building an operations archive. So Ho was uninterested in Shirley and Marcus's chattering, and the office above theirs was empty because Harper and Guy weren't yet back. If they had been, it's likely that one would have knelt with an ear to the floor and relayed each word to the other. And if River Cartwright had been in there instead of in the room above Ho's, he might have done the same. It would have relieved the boredom. Which he should have been used to, but it kept recurring like a week-old insect bite that wouldn't quit. Though if that analogy were to ring true, River now thought, he'd have to be wearing boxing gloves too, unable to scratch, just rubbing away without effect. Until a few months ago he had shared this room. Now it was his alone, though a second desk remained, equipped with a PC that was newer, faster, and less battered than River's. He could have commandeered it, but service PCs were user-specific, and he'd have had to log a request for IT to reassign it, a 30-minute job that could take 8 months. And while he could have short-circuited the process by asking Ho to do it, this would have invoked asking Ho to do it, and he wasn't that desperate. He drummed an offbeat rhythm with his fingers and studied the ceiling. Exactly the kind of pointless noise that could draw a returning thump from Jackson Lamb, meaning both shut up and come here. The fact that there wasn't much to do didn't stop Lamb dreaming up tasks. Last week he'd sent River out collecting takeaway cartons. River had plucked them from bins, gutters, car roofs, had found a trove in a Barbican flower bed, chewed by rats or foxes. Then Lamb had made him compare them with his own collection, the fruit of 6 months' afternoon snacking. He'd become convinced that Sam Yu, frontman of the new empire next door, was giving him smaller cartons than everyone else and was working up the evidence. Borderline Lamb, he might have meant it, might have been taking the piss. Either way, River was the one up to his elbows in bins. For a while, a few months back, it had looked like things were changing. After years of squatting upstairs, happily dumping on the poor saps below, Lamb had appeared to be taking an interest. At the very least had enjoyed putting the screws on Lady Di Taverner at Regent's Park. But the mould was showing through again. Lamb had grown bored with excitement, preferring the comfortably unchanging days, so River was still here, and Slough House was still Slough House, and the work was the same grunt work it had always been. Today was a case in point. Today he was a typist. Yesterday he'd been a scanner operator. Today the scanner wouldn't work, so today he was a typist entering pre-digital death records onto a database. The deceased had all been 6 months old or younger and had died while rationing was still enforced, prime targets for identity theft. Back then you worked this by taking names from gravestones, a less innocent form of brass rubbing. Birth certificates were then claimed lost and copies sought. After that you simply traced the life the infant might have led with all its attendant paperwork, national insurance number, bank account, driving license. All of the details that built up a person could be faked. The only thing real was the person. But anyone who'd actually done this would be collecting a pension by now. Any sleepers using the names River had found could have called themselves Rip Van Winkle instead. So it was just make work for the slow horses, plugging gaps in a history book, nothing more. And where was Jackson Lamb? Sitting here wouldn't answer that. Having risen without consciously deciding to, River went with the flow, out of his office, up the stairs. The top floor was always dark. Even when Lamb's door was open, his blinds were drawn, and Catherine's office at the back of the building sat in the shadow of a nearby office block. Catherine preferred lamps to overhead lighting, the only trait she shared with Lamb, and these didn't so much dispel the gloom as accentuate it, casting twin pools of yellow light between which murkiness swarmed. Her monitor gave a grey glow, and in its wash, as River entered her room, she seemed a figment from a fairy tale, a pale lady hoarding wisdom. River plonked himself on a chair next to a pile of vari-coloured folders. While the rest of the world pursued a digital addenda, Lamb insisted on hard copy. He'd once toyed with instigating an Employee of the Month award, based slowly on weight of output. If he'd had a pair of scales and an attention span, River didn't doubt he'd have done so. "Let me guess," Catherine said. "You've finished what you were doing and want some more work." "Ho, ho. What's he up to, Catherine?" "He doesn't tell me." She seemed amused that River thought he might. "He does what he does. He doesn't ask my permission." "But you're closest to him." Her expression wavered not 1 inch. "Geographically, I mean. You take his calls, you manage his diary." "His diary's empty, River. Mostly he stares at the ceiling and farts." "It's a captivating picture." "He smokes in there too, and it's a government office." "We could make a citizen's arrest." "We might want to practice on someone smaller." "I don't know how you stand it." "Oh, I offer it up." Fear flashed in River's eyes. "Joke?" "He'd drive a saint to suicide. Anyway, frankly, whatever he's up to, I'm just relieved he's somewhere else." "He's not at the park," River said. "When Lamb was at the park, he made sure everyone knew it, probably hoping someone would break and ask if they could come too. But something's up. He's been weird, even for Lamb." Lamb's weirdness would pass for normality in other people. His phone had rung and he'd answered it. He'd had Ho unfreeze his browser, which meant he'd been online. In fact, he'd given the impression of having a job to do. "And he hasn't said a word," River said. "Not one." "So you've no idea what's lured him into the streets?" "Oh, I didn't say that," Catherine said. River studied her, an old-fashioned creature whose pale colouring spoke of an indoor life. Her clothes covered her wrist to ankle. She wore hats, for God's sake. He guessed she was 50-ish, and until the business last year he hadn't paid her much attention. There was little in a wall-hugging woman her age to interest an uptight man of his. But when things had turned nasty, she hadn't panicked. She'd even pointed a gun at Spider Webb, as had River. This shared experience made them fellow members of a select club. She was waiting for him to respond. He said, "Tell? Who's Lamb send for when he needs something?" "Ho," River said. "Exactly. And you know how sound travels here. You heard them talking?" "No," Catherine said. That's what was interesting. Interesting because Lamb was not in the habit of modulating his tones. So whatever it is, it's not for the likes of us. But Roddy knows. It was also interesting that Catherine called Ho Roddy. Nobody else called Ho anything. He wasn't someone you engaged in casual chat, because if you didn't come with broadband, you weren't worth his attention. On the other hand, he currently possessed information River would like to share. "Well then," he said, "let's go talk to Roddy, shall we?" "Nice," said Min. "Best you can do?" "Fucking spectacular, then. Better?" "Much." They were on the 77th floor of one of the city's newest buildings, a great glass needle that soared 80 stories into London skies. And it was some room they were in, a huge one, yea meters long and woe meters wide, with floor-to-ceiling views to north and west of the capital, and then the wide space beyond where the capital gave up and the sky took over. She could spend days in here, Louisa thought, not eating, not drinking, just taking in as much of the view as she could, in every weather and all types of light. Fucking spectacular didn't come close. Even the lift had been a thrill, quieter, smoother, and faster than any she'd known. Min said, "Cool, wasn't it?" The lift. At reception, the plastic cops. The security guys who checked their service ID with what Min had interpreted as awe and envy. Louisa thought it more the look state kids aimed at their public school counterparts, the age-old enmity of yobs versus toughs. A long-time yob herself, she enjoyed the irony. She laid her palm against the glass, then rested her forehead there. This brought a delicious feeling of safe vertigo, set a butterfly fluttering in her stomach even while her brain enjoyed the view. Min stood by, hands in pockets. "This is the highest you've been?" she asked. He gave her a slow look. "The aeroplane?" "Yeah, no, highest building. Empire State. Been there, done that. Twin Towers?" She shook her head. "They were already gone when I was there." "Me too," he said. They were quiet for a while, watching London operate way below, thinking similar thoughts, of a morning when people in a different city had stood at greater heights, enjoying similar views from different windows, not knowing they'd never put their feet on the ground again, that the threads of their future had been severed with box cutters. Now Min pointed, and following his fingers she saw a speck in the distance. An aeroplane. Not one of the liners leaving Heathrow, but a small, buzzy machine ploughing its own furrow. Min said, "I wonder how close they get." "You think it's that important?" Louisa said, "this mini-summit, big enough for a replay?" She didn't have to specify what it would be a replay of. After a while, Min said, "No, I guess not. Or it wouldn't have been entrusted to them, Regent's Park audit or not. Got to do it properly, though. Look at all the angles," she agreed. "Else we end up looking bad, even when nothing bad happens." "You think this is a test of some kind?" "Of what?" "Us," she said, "finding out if we're up to the job." "And if we pass it, we get back to Regent's Park?" She shrugged. "Whatever." This many people had made the return journey from Slough House to the park. None. They both knew that. But like every other slow horse before them, Min and Louisa hid secret hopes their story would be different. At length she turned and surveyed the room. Still yea meters long and woe meters wide, it took up about half of the floor. The separate suite, also currently vacant, enjoying the views south and east. There was a shared lobby area where the smart lifts arrived. A third, the service lift, lay behind the stairwell, which was a vision of eternal descent. It passed floors and floors of high-end corporate offices, only some of which were yet occupied. The list in the folder Webb had provided included banks, investment companies, yacht salesmen, diamond merchants, a defense contractor. The tower's lower third was a hotel, its grand opening scheduled for the following month. She'd read it was fully booked through the next 5 years. Spiderweb must have called in favors or opened some classified folders to secure the suite for his meeting, a few weeks hence. Any part of town, a space like this commanded respect. This high up, it demanded awe. Kitchen and bathrooms aside, it was a single room designed for business. Its centerpiece, a beautiful mahogany oval table big enough for 16 chairs, which, if it hadn't been larger than Louisa's entire flat, she'd have coveted. But like the view, the table belonged to the moneyed. This wasn't supposed to factor into her motivation, but still. Here they were, the pair of them, and they'd be ensuring the safety of some hotshot whose pocket change equaled twice their joint salaries. Forget it, she thought. Not relevant, but couldn't help saying, "Kind of flash for a discreet meeting." "Yeah, well," Min said, "don't suppose they'll have anyone peeping through the windows. How do they clean them, do you think? Some kind of hoist? We'd better find out." That was just for starters. They'd need an itinerary, where the Russian was staying and the route from there to here. Who was catering? Drivers. They'd need to study Webb's notes and do extra digging because Webb was trustworthy as a snake. And they'd need sweepers to check for bugs and maybe a techie to provide interference, though she doubted parabolic eavesdropping was possible. The nearest high building was a dwarf by comparison. Min touched her shoulder. "We'll be fine. Jumped-up brusky oligarch is all. Coming over here, buying our football teams. It's babysitting, like Webb said. She knew, but Rusky oligarchs weren't the most popular breed on the planet, and there was always the possibility something would go wrong, and underneath that, a very faint glimmer of possibility that everything would go right. It swam into her mind again that this could be a test, and alongside it swam a creepier notion. What if a successful outcome resulted in a single ticket home? A desk at Regent's Park for one of them, but not the other. If it were hers, would she take it? If it were Min's, would he? He might. She couldn't blame him. She might too. All the same, she shrugged his hand off her shoulder. "What's up?" "Nothing. We're at work, that's all." Min said, "Sure, sorry," but there was nothing snarky in his tone. He wandered towards the doors, through which lay the lifts, the other suite, the stairwell. Louisa in his wake veered off into the kitchen. It was spotless, unused, gleaming, fully equipped with a fridge that was restaurant-sized but empty. Fixed to the wall was a friendly red fire extinguisher. Next to it, behind a glass cover, a fire blanket and a small X. She opened bare cupboards, closed them again, returned to the big room and its windows, through which she could now see an air ambulance, seemingly stationary over central London, though possibly swinging like a randy divorcee from the point of view of those that it carried. And she thought again of the Black Swans and the huge and improbable events they'd lent their name to. It was only afterwards you knew you'd encountered one. The helicopter was still hovering there when she went to find Min. Ho didn't like having his space invaded, especially not by River Cartwright, who was one of those who ignored the likes of Roderick Ho except when he needed something only the likes of Roderick Ho could provide. Technological competence, for instance. Competence was generally beyond Cartwright. For a while, Ho had used a CCTV still of the King's Cross chaos as a screensaver until Louisa Guy suggested River might break his elbows if he found out. But Catherine Standish was with him, and while Ho didn't precisely like Standish, he couldn't put his finger on a reason for disliking her. Since this put her in a select category, he decided to see what they wanted before telling them he was busy. River made a space on the spare desk and perched on its corner. Catherine pulled out a chair and sat. "How are you today, Roddy?" His eyes narrowed with suspicion. She'd called him that before. He said to River, "Don't move my stuff." "I haven't moved anything." "My stuff on the desk there, you just rearrange it. I've got everything sorted. You put it out of order, I won't be able to find it." River opened his mouth to make a number of points, but Catherine caught his eye. He changed direction. "Sorry." Catherine said, "Roddy, we were wondering if you could do us a favour." "What sort of favour?" "It involves your area of expertise. If you want broadband," Ho said, "maybe you should just think about paying for it." "That would be like asking a plastic surgeon to do ingrown toenails," Catherine said. "Yeah," said River, "or getting an architect to wash your windows." Ho regarded him suspiciously. "Or a lion tamer to feed your cat," River added. The look Catherine flashed him indicated that he wasn't helping. "The other day in Lamb's office," she began, but Ho wasn't having it. "No way." "I hadn't finished. You don't need to. You want to know what Lamb wanted, right? Just a clue. He'd kill me, and he could do it too. He's killed people before." "That's what he wants you to think," River said. "You're saying he hasn't?" "I'm saying he's not allowed to kill staff. Health and safety." "Yeah, right, but I'm not talking killing. Ho turned back to Catherine. "He'd kill me on a daily basis. You know what he's like." "He doesn't need to find out," she said. "He always finds out." River said, "Roddy, don't call me that. Whatever. A few months ago we did a good thing, yes?" "Maybe," Ho said suspiciously. "So what?" "That was teamwork." "It was kind of teamwork," Ho admitted. "So, the kind where I had all the ideas, you did a lot of running around, I remember?" River bit back his first response. "We all play to our strengths," he said. "My point is, for a while there, Slough House worked. Know what I mean? We played as a team, and it worked." So now we do it again, Ho said. That would be good, yes. Only this time, instead of running around, you just sit there while I do all the work again. He turned to Catherine, and then Lamb finds out and kills me. River said, Okay, how about this? You don't tell us anything, but we find out anyway and tell him you told us. Then he kills you. Catherine said, River! No, seriously, Lamb never locks his computer, and we all know what his password is. Lamb's password was password. Ho said, if you were going to do that, you'd have done it. You wouldn't be bothering me. No, well, it hadn't occurred to me till now, he looked at Catherine. What's the opposite of teamwork? She said, It's not going to happen, Roddy. He's kidding. It doesn't sound like he's kidding. Well, he is. She looked at River. Isn't that right? He surrendered. Whatever, she said to Ho. You don't have to tell us anything you don't want to. As an interrogation technique, thought River, this lacked bite. Ho chewed his lip and looked at his monitor. This was angled so River couldn't see it, but reflected in Ho's glasses, he could make out a thin tracery of lines cobwebbing the screen and green lights blinking on a black background. Ho could be navigating his way through an MOD firewall, or playing Battleship with himself, but either way he seemed to be contemplating something else altogether at the moment. All right, he said at last. There, River said, that wasn't so hard, was it? I wasn't talking to you. I'll tell her. For fuck's sake, Ho, she'll tell me herself as soon as— And who's she? Catherine asked. The cat's mother? Two men shared an unlikely moment of mystified brotherhood. Never mind, she said. She pointed at River. Out. No arguments. There were arguments, and he made a few of them, but only in his head. Back upstairs, he looked in on Harper and Guy's office, but they weren't back. Meeting, Harper had said when River asked, which might have meant a meeting, or might have meant they were taking advantage of Lamb's absence to do whatever they did these days. A walk in the park, a movie, sex in Louise's car. Park, though. They couldn't have gone to Regent's Park, could they? The thought stilled him, but only for a moment. It didn't sound likely. In his own room, he spent 5 minutes reacquainting himself with the database of the dead and another 10 staring out from behind the window's worn gilt lettering. W. W. Henderson, Solicitor and Commissioner for Oaths. There were 3 people at the bus stop outside, and as River watched, a bus arrived and took them all away. Immediately someone else arrived and began waiting for the next bus. River wondered how she'd react if she knew she was being watched by a member of the intelligence service. Wondered, too, what she'd make of the notion that she almost certainly had a more exciting job than his. He wandered back to his computer where he entered a fictitious name and dates on the database, thought for a bit, then deleted them. Catherine knocked and entered. You busy? She said. This can wait. Ha bloody ha, she said. Lamb wanted a service personnel file. Ho doesn't have access to those. Very funny. File was on an occasional from the 80s, a man called Dickie Bow. You're kidding, right? Real name Bow, but his parents were stupid enough to call him Richard. I take it you've never heard of him. River said, Give me a moment. He leaned back, mentally refocusing on an image of the OB, old bastard, an epithet bestowed by River's mother. He'd been largely raised by the OB, whose long life had been dedicated to the intelligence service, and much of whose long retirement was spent doling out its highlights to his only grandson. River Cartwright was a spook because that's what his grandfather was. Not had been, was. Some professions you never gave up, long after they were over. David Cartwright was a service legend, but the way he told it, the same held true for the lowliest bagman. You could change sides, sell your secrets, offer your memoirs to the highest bidder, but once a spook, you were always a spook, and everything else was just cover. So the friendly old man troweling his flower beds with a silly hat on remained the strategist who'd helped plot the service's course through the Cold War, and River had grown up learning the details, which mattered. This the OB had drummed into him before he was 10. Details mattered. River blinked once, then again, but came back with nothing. Dickie Bow? Ridiculous name, but not one River had heard before. Sorry, he said, it means nothing. He was found dead last week, she said. In suspicious circumstances. On a bus. He clasped his hands behind his head. The floor's yours. Beau was on a train to Worcester, but it was cancelled at Reading because of signalling problems. The bus was taking passengers from there to Oxford, where the trains were okay. At Oxford, everyone got off except Beau. This was because he died en route. Natural causes? So the report says. And Beau's not been on the books for a while, so not what you'd call an obvious candidate for assassination, even if he'd ever done anything important. Which you're sure he hadn't. You know what personnel records are like. Secure stuff's redacted, and anything more sensitive than a routine drop and poke is secure. But Beau's file's an open book barring some drink-related incident near the end. He did a lot of toad work. Cash for info, mostly gossip. He worked in a nightclub, so he picked up a lot. Which would have been useful for blackmail purposes, of course. So revenge isn't out of the question. But it was all a long time ago, and like I say, natural causes. So why is Lamb interested, River mused. No idea. Maybe they worked together, she paused. A note says he was a talented streetwalker. That doesn't mean what it sounds like, does it? Happily no, it means he was good at shadowing people, following them. Well then, maybe Lamb just heard he died and got sentimental. Yes, but seriously. Catherine said, Beau didn't have a ticket for his journey, and he was supposed to be at work. I wonder where he was going. I'd never heard of him until 2 minutes ago. I doubt my speculations are worth much. Mine either, but it's got Lamb off his arse, so there must be something to it. She fell silent. To River, her gaze seemed to turn inward as if she were looking for something she'd left at the back of her mind, and he noticed for the first time that her hair wasn't entirely grey, that in the right light might even look blonde. But her nose was long and pinched, and she wore hats, and it all added up to a kind of greyness. So that was how you saw her when she wasn't there, and after a while became the way you saw her even when she was. A sort of witchiness that might even be sexy in the right circumstances. To break the spell, he spoke. I wonder what kind of something. Assume the worst, Catherine said. Maybe we should ask him. Catherine said, I'm not sure that's such a good idea. It wasn't such a good idea. A few hours later, River heard Lamb whomping up the stairs like an out-of-breath bear. He waited a while, staring at his monitor without seeing it. Maybe we should ask him. Simple enough while Lamb was elsewhere, a different proposition with him on the premises. But the alternative was to sit looking at reams of indigestible information, and besides, if River backed down, Catherine would think him chicken. She was waiting on the landing, eyebrow raised. Sure about this? Well, no. Lamb's door was open. Catherine tapped, and they went in. Lamb was trying to turn his computer on. He still wore his coat, and an unlit cigarette dangled from his mouth. He eyed them as if they were Mormons. What's this, an intervention? River said, We were wondering what's going on. Puzzled, Lamb stared at River, then plucked the cigarette from his lips and stared at that instead. Then returned it to his mouth and stared at River again. Eh? Yeah, I got that. I was having a what-the-fuck moment. He looked at Catherine. You're a drunk, so wondering what's happening is a daily experience. What's his excuse? Dickie Beau, Catherine said. Lamb's crack didn't visibly affect her, but she'd been in the business a while. She'd been Charles' partner's PA while partner had run the service, had filled that role until finding him dead in his bathtub, though her career had been interrupted by, yes, being a drunk. Along the way, she'd picked up clues about hiding emotions. He was in Berlin same time as you and died last week on a bus outside Oxford. That's where you've been, isn't it? Tracing his journey? Lamb shook his head in disbelief. What happened? Someone come round and sew your balls back on? I told you not to answer the door to strangers. We don't like being out of the loop. You're always out of the loop. The loop's miles away. Nearest you'll get to being in the loop is when they make a documentary about it and show it on the History Channel. I thought you were aware of that. Oh, God, here's another one. Marcus Longridge had appeared behind them carrying a manila folder. I'm supposed to give this to, Lamb said. I've forgotten your name. Longridge, said Marcus. I don't want to know. I was making a point. Lamb plucked a stained mug from the litter on his desk and threw it at Catherine. River caught it before it reached her head. Lamb said, Well, I'm glad we've had this chat. Now fuck off. Cartwright, give that to Standish. Standish, fill it with tea. And you, I've forgotten your name again. Go next door and get my lunch. Tell Sam I want my usual Tuesday. It's Monday. I know it's Monday. If I wanted my usual Monday, I wouldn't have to specify, would I? He blinked. Still here? Catherine held his stare a little longer. It had become a matter between the two of them, River realized. He might as well not be here. And for a moment he thought Lamb might look away first, but it didn't happen. Catherine gave a shrug instead, one in which something seemed to leave her body, then turned away. She took the folder Longridge was holding and went into her office. The other pair trooped downstairs. So, that went well, he thought. But before River had been at his desk 20 minutes, came a god-awful noise from upstairs. The kind you'd get if you tipped a monitor off a high enough desk that the screen shattered when it hit the deck. It was followed by the scattering rattle of plastic and glass shards spreading across the available space. River wasn't the only one who jumped, and everyone in the building heard the oath that followed. Fucking hell! After that, Slough House went quiet for a while. The film was grainy, jerky, black and white, and showed a train at a platform late in the evening. It was raining. The platform was roofed, but water trickled down from misaligned guttering. Seconds passed while nothing happened. Then came a sudden onrush, as if a gate had been opened off-screen, releasing a swarm of anxious passengers. Their jerky motion was due to the film skipping frames. Movements gave it away. The sudden appearance of hands from pockets, umbrellas folding without warning. Mostly the expressions on offer betrayed irritation, anxiety, the desire to be elsewhere. River, who was good at faces, recognized no one. They were in Ho's office because Ho had the best equipment. After Lamb had tipped his computer over while trying to insert a CD, a piece of slapstick River would have given a month's salary to have witnessed, he'd boiled in his room half an hour, then stalked downstairs as if this had been the plan all along. Catherine Standish followed a moment later. It might have been residual embarrassment which prevented Lamb from protesting when the other slow horses assembled in his wake, though River doubted it. Jackson Lamb couldn't have defined embarrassment without breaking into a sweat. And once he'd given Ho the CD, and it was up and running, it was clear he expected them all to watch. Questions would follow. There was no sound, nothing to indicate where this was happening. When the platform cleared, the train began to move, and there were no clues there either. It simply jerked into motion and pulled out of view. What was left was an empty platform and a railway track onto which heavy rain fell. After 4 or 5 seconds of this, which might have been 15 or 20 in real time, the screen went black. The entire sequence had lasted no more than 3 minutes. And again, Lamb said. Ho tapped keys, and they watched it again. This time, when it stopped, Lamb said, Well? Min Harper said, CCTV footage? Brilliant. Anyone got anything intelligent to add? Marcus Longridge said, That's a westbound train. They run out of Paddington into Wales and Somerset. The Cotswolds. Where was that? Oxford? Yes, but I still can't remember your name. River said, I'll make him a badge. Meanwhile, what about the bald guy? Which bald guy? About a minute and a half in, most of the others pile onto the train, but he walks up the platform past the camera. Presumably he gets on board further up. Why him? Lamb asked. Because it's pouring. Everyone else is getting on the train within view of the camera. That suggests the rest of the platform's not covered. They're all trying to stay out of the rain, but he's not. And it's not like he's carrying an umbrella. Or wearing a hat, Lamb said. Like the one you brought in. Lamb paused a beat, then said, Like that, yes. If that's Oxford, Catherine said, Then that's the crowd just got off the bus Dickie Bowe died on, right? Looking at Ho, Lamb said, You have been a busy bee. Anything else you've made public I should know about? My dental records, bank account? Ho was still smarting from being reduced to entertainments officer. That'd be like asking a plastic surgeon to do your ingrown toenails. I hope you don't think I'm insulting you, Lamb said kindly. Because when that happens you'll know all about it, you slanty-eyed twat. He turned to the others. Okay, he said, Cartwright wasn't wrong, and it's not often I get to say that. Our bald friend, let's call him Mr. B, got on a train at Oxford last Tuesday evening. The train was headed for Worcester, but stopped several times along the way. Where'd Mr. B get off? Are we supposed to guess? Min asked. Yes, because I'm really interested in pointless speculation. River said, You got this footage from Oxford? Well done. Presumably other stations will have coverage too. And aren't there cameras on trains these days? Louisa put in. Lamb clapped. This is fantastic, he said. It's like having little elves do my thinking for me. So now you've established those facts, which would have taken an idiot half the time, let's move on to the more important business of me telling one of you to go check out such coverage and bring me an answer. I can do that, River said. Lamb ignored him. Harper, he said, this could be up your street. It doesn't involve carrying anything, so you don't need worry about losing it. Min glanced at Louisa. Whoa, said Lamb. He looked at Ho. Did you see that? See what? Harper just shared a little glance with his girlfriend. I wonder what that means. He leaned back in Ho's chair and steepled his fingers under his chin. You're going to tell me you can't? We've been given an assignment, Harper said. We? Louisa and... Call her Guy. It's not a disco. The thing to do here, they all decided independently, was not waste a whole lot of time asking why that might make it a disco. And also, Lamb went on, assignment? Min said, We've been seconded. Webb said you'd know about it by now. Webb? That would be the famous spider. Isn't he in charge of counting paper clips? He does other stuff too, Louisa said. Like, second my stuff for an assignment? Which is what, precisely? And please say you're not allowed to give me details. Babysitting a visiting Russian. I thought they had professionals for that sort of thing, Lamb said. You know, people who know what they're doing. Except, don't tell me. This is Sir Len's legacy, right? What a circus. If we're that worried about him fiddling the books, why didn't we stop him years ago? Because we didn't know, Catherine suggested. We're supposed to be the fucking intelligence service, Lamb pointed out. Okay, you're seconded. I don't get a say in the matter, do I? The wolfish grin which accompanied this carried a promise of happier days when he would have a say in the matter and would say it loud and clear. Which leaves me with this crew. I'll do it, River said again. For Christ's sake, this is MI5, not a kiddie's playground. Operational decisions don't turn on who says bagsies. I decide who goes. Lamb counted them off from the right. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. At Mo, his finger rested on River. He moved it back to Shirley. Meeny, you're it. River said, I was Mo. And I don't base operational decisions on children's games, remember? He pressed eject and the CD drawer slid open. He tossed the disc in Shirley's direction and it sailed through the open door. Butterfingers, pick that up and watch it again. Then you go find Mr. B. Now? No, in your own time. Of course now. He looked round. I could have sworn the rest of you had jobs to do. Catherine arched her eyebrows at River and left. The others followed with visible relief, leaving only Ho and River. Lamb said to Ho, I might have guessed Cartwright would want to continue the discussion, but it beats me why you're still here. It's my office, Ho explained. Lamb waited. Ho sighed and left. River said, You were always going to do that, weren't you? Do what? All that crap about putting the kettle on, fetching your lunch, it was a wind-up. You need us. Somebody has to do your legwork. "Speaking of legs," said Jackson Lamb, and raised his so they stuck out horizontally, then farted. "I was always going to do that." "Too," he pointed out. He put his feet back on the ground. "Doesn't make it any less effective." Whatever you thought of Lamb's act, nobody ever accused his farts of lacking authenticity. "Anyway," he went on, unperturbed by his toxic gift, "if it hadn't been for Standish, we wouldn't have gone all round the houses. Don't like being out of the loop, for Christ's sake. Can't blame it on the rag at her age, unless pickling herself in booze all those years had a preservative effect. What do you think?" "I think it's pretty strange you're so sure Beau was murdered when the post-mortem said his heart gave out." "That doesn't answer my question, but I'll let it pass. Here's another one." Lamb folded his right leg over his left. "If you wanted to poison someone without anyone finding out, what would you use?" "I'm not really up on poisons." "Hallelujah! Something you're not an expert in." Lamb had this magic trick. He could produce a cigarette out of almost nowhere, out of the briefest dip into the nearest pocket. In its opposite number he found a disposable lighter. River would have protested, but smoke could only improve the atmosphere. It was improbable Lamb was unaware of this. "Longridge hasn't brought my lunch yet. I hope the sorry bastard's not forgotten." "So, you do know his name?" He regretted that as soon as he'd said it. Lamb said, "Jesus, Cartwright, which one of us does that embarrass more?" He took a deep drag on his cigarette, and the coal glowed orange, half an inch long. "I'll be in late tomorrow," he said. "Stuff to do. You know how it is." A thin cloud of tobacco smoke turned his eyes to slits. "Don't break your neck down the stairs." "Up the stairs," River said. "Ho's office, remember?" "Cartwright?" River halted in the doorway. "You don't want to know how Dickie Beau died? You're seriously going to tell me?" "It's obvious when you think about it," Lamb said. "Whoever killed him used an untraceable poison.